European Union leaders have been told that they must compromise. EU Council Chief Herman Van Rompuy urged member states, as they met in Brussels, to work out the Union's budget for the next 7 years. Britain is leading a campaign for massive spending cuts, and other poorer nations want a budget that helps to kickstart growth and bridges the wealth gap.
Talking money is never easy. EU leaders have revised figures for the Eurozone's budget for the next 7 years, scaling down from 1.04 trillion euros to 973 billion, and now some sources say a final figure could be around 960 billion. For now, the debate is not whether to cut, but what to cut.
The past weeks have been productive, and I'm confident that around this table we can now settle on a final compromise. We simply have to. In all budget talks, understandably, there is a tendency to get absorbed in small, riveting details and forget the bigger picture, even though it matters most.
What matters most is clear when looking at the pie. This year's EU budget is just over 132 billion euros, the largest portions going to agricultural policy and cohesion, aid to countries economically lagging behind. Two areas members are most hesitant to trim. France even pledged to veto any deal that would cut spending in agriculture. Instead, cuts are likely to come from smaller sectors such as infrastructure, telecoms, and administration. Also on the chopping block could be EU projects outside the Eurozone.
Some leaders, like British Prime Minister David Cameron, want the budget reduced further. He says the EU should not be immune from the pressures national governments are facing. But French President François Hollande has said his demands are unreasonable and said he would question Britain's contested budget rebate. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has positioned herself as a mediator between the two sides. If a budget agreement isn't reached by the end of this year, the 2013 budget will roll over on a month-by-month basis, putting some long-term projects at risk.
What we're talking about here is what the European Union is allowed to spend over the next 7 years, and frankly the European Union should not be immune from the sorts of pressures that we've had to reduce spending, find efficiencies and make sure that we spend money wisely, that we're all having to do right across Europe. Now, when we were last here in November, the numbers that were put forward were much too high. They need to come down, and if they don't come down, there won't be a deal.
Countries who receive more than they pay want to preserve the budget. That includes many of the states of southern and eastern Europe. France too wants to keep spending relatively high, despite being a net payer into the budget.
We have to make savings, but without weakening the economy. Should some partners be unreasonable, I will try to reason with them, but only up to a point.
In the context of an economy the size of Europe's, the differences are not large. But all the leaders have domestic political issues to keep in mind, so they can't afford to give ground too easily.